Good morning. I'm so happy to be with you this morning. It's morning here. It might not be there, depending on what time of day that you're watching this. But I'm so happy to be part of our very first subject, our Intro to Psychology in our program for marriage and family therapy. Thank you for letting us do this with you. We're so excited to learn together. My name is Borchardt, and I'm a chaplain in marriage and family therapist here in Godrich, Ontario. I'm part of the team that comes over every year, and I want to say I have a picture of you in front of me so that I can remember that I'm talking to you, wishing I was there with you, but talking to you, not just talking to a screen, which is very intimidating. And I want to make sure that you can see that I'm wearing my Katangi that I got from Caiaphas and Roster. Thank you very much that I can wear that while I'm teaching. It's very important to me, so thank you. Well, I'm going to share my screen with you and show you my PowerPoint. And this really, this really is just my notes. When I take a subject, I always have a piece of paper beside me and I jot down the things that mean something to me. So as you go through this, you'll see that the bullet points are very brief. They're just to catch my attention and let me know what it was that I was interested in, and then I can look into it better. So I'm hoping that you will do that. Before we do any of our subjects, we're hoping that you'll go in and you'll read the chapter first, jot down anything that's interesting to you, and then as you listen to our presentation, and then later we'll get together for our Zoom conversation and talk about it, that we'll have a good idea and able to have a good conversation about it. So I wonder if while you're listening to me, you could have a piece of paper and divide it up into different columns. And as we talk about each person that contributed to the birth of psychology, jot down their names and beside them what it was their thought that was predominant, and different questions that you might ask or might think about it. So that's your first homework. It's very much putting together the pieces of a puzzle. I love this picture. So we're going to talk about foundations, the foundations of psychology. These are the foundations of the Life Impact Training Center. We camped in these foundations. We set our tents up in 2014 when we first came. The first dormitory was over here. It was already built, and the wonderful ladies who brought our water from the stream in the big buckets on their heads, I was so in admiration of them, and then cooked our meals over the fire. And then we slept in the foundations here in our tents. But then over the years, it's been built up into the second dormitory. They added the lovely dining room in the middle there, and this is one of the programs that we were able to do because of that dream that was in that foundation, and the groups that we've been able to bring over, and all the teaching that we've been able to share. And it's been such a wonderful experience for me to watch it grow. So we talk about Christ as our firm foundation, and again we want to recognize that this is his dream and his school and his truth, and we're going to build on it. He is called our cornerstone, and the cornerstone is so important to helping the foundation be exactly right. If the foundation's not set properly, then the house can't be built upon it. It will grow crooked, or it will fall down, like in the storm. So the foundations of psychology. What is psychology, and why should we study it? Psychology is the scientific study of the brain and behavior. It starts with a hypothesis. We have an idea. We think something might be. And we have an idea of why, so it's our proposed explanation. We might have a little bit of evidence. It's just the starting point. We don't know for sure, but we're going to build on that. So we develop a theory, and the theory is a supposition or a system of ideas that we think will explain it. it's usually built on something we already know, a general principle, and something that we already believe to be true. And so we work forward from that. Psychology uses a scientific method, a systemic observation, and then measurement and experimentation, establishing formulas, testing them and modifying them, and developing hypotheses. Again, it's very important to be open to suggestions and other opinions of other people. You'll even find that between Roseanne and Alan and I that we have different ideas about things. So I hope that this will be an open arena where we can share what we're thinking and not be afraid. And criticism, one quote in the book was, criticism is the backbone of the scientific method. So why do we study psychology? Well, it helps us develop critical thinking skills. I'm a very emotional person, and I often go with my feelings. And my daughter was very adamant that I had to take critical thinking as a subject because she wanted me to know how to weigh options and choose healthy things. And so it helps us to understand our families. As I was doing my degree, I was thinking, oh, that's why that happened. Now I understand why my family worked that way. Or even my own behavior. That's why I reacted that way. It was good for me to see that it's principles that are throughout human beings and not just my mistakes. I thought it was wonderful. It was like 3 years of free counseling. It was great. Actually, my BA in psychology took me longer than 3 years. It took me about 10 because it was a 3-year course. It took me 10 years. But I was doing it while I was raising my family. So it was, and I was working as well. So it's just evening courses. So this will be a 3-year course spread out over 4 years because we want to make sure that we give you a year of supervision as you go on into your practices. So we wanted to talk about some different ways that we can use psychology if you decide to go on in psychology and make it a career for yourself, or if you use what you've learned in any of the other jobs that you choose. So my daughter, Sarah Sawyer, has a BA in psychology from Tyndale Seminary, and she worked for many years as an instructor therapist with children with autism. There was a behavioral therapist who formulated the plan for the child, and then Sarah was the instructor therapist who carried it out with the child using operant conditioning, which we'll learn about later in more detail. But she also, because of the pandemic, the nursing homes were allowed to bring people in and train them. So she came in to be trained as a nurse's aide, and she used her skills with the behaviors of the children. She used them with the behavioral specialist in long-term care on the residents who had challenging behaviors and more extreme emotional needs. And she grew to love it so much that now she's considering a career in nursing. So that's exciting to see that she's using it. You can use it in any profession that you're in. Alan Studd was a military chaplain and is a retired minister in the Anglican Church. He's a registered marriage and family therapist and a registered psychotherapist with the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. He's a missionary teacher, of course. He's been with us so many times and enjoys, this is really his dream, is this degree. So we thank him for that. We met in the Ontario Association for Marriage and Family Therapy in the International Counseling team. And now he was very instrumental in setting up the Canadian Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. And I know his dream is to set up a Zambian Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. So he has used his psychology very widely. And I have a Master of Divinity, and I'm a registered psychotherapist and a registered marriage and family therapist. And I'm also, I do counseling, but I am a chaplain, which is spiritual care, usually in military or medicine. So in hospitals and long-term cares. And so, but we do far more than just pray with people and do services. We take care of them emotionally and psychologically. So we have a new name. Our new name is Psychosocial Spiritual Care Clinician. So that captures it a little bit better. Much of the work that I do is in palliative care and family care, grief support. And of course, my lifelong dream was to come to Africa. And thank you, Lord, that He picked Zambia for me to come to and with this program. I'm so excited. And to be a missionary teacher, just a dream of a lifetime for me. And I'm teaching under the supervision of Roseanne. Roseanne has a PhD. She's a clinical psychologist, a forensic psychologist. She's an expert court witness many times. She's been called for that. She is a child psychologist, chiefly in this town, supervising other people as they become psychometrists and child psychologists. And she's a play therapist. And she's used some of that with our children in Zambia as well. She is a professor, has been a professor in the past, and now she is again a professor in our new school. So thank you, Roseanne. So let's get started talking about some of the people whose first thoughts were. I'm going to just take a pause here for a second. I'm going to just turn off the recording just for 1 second. Maybe I am. Oh, maybe I'll just carry on because I don't want to mess up. Okay, I'm going to talk about Wilhelm Wundt. He was a German scientist, and he was first called a psychologist. His theory was he wanted to look in internal perception, observing our thoughts and actions, not just feeling them and acting on them, but actually standing back and having a look and thinking, I wonder why that's happening. It reminds me of Psalm 43, where David says, "Why are you downcast, O my soul? And why are you disquieted within me? Hope thou in God." So David is talking to himself, talking to his soul, observing how he's feeling and challenging it. That kind of sounds like cognitive behavioral therapy, doesn't it? He was very interested in the study of culture and of people and how they influence us. One of his students, Edward Titchener, he developed the theory even farther into structuralism. He believed he wanted to focus on the contents of mental processes rather than the function. And he loved to study reaction time, and we'll learn a little bit more about that later. How long it took someone to do a task, and if you rewarded them if they would do it faster. William James was a functionalist, and he and Wundt were actually said to be the founders of psychology as a science and academic discipline. Before that, it had generally been a study of philosophy, but now it was a discipline distinct from philosophy. And so they were considered the fathers of psychology. He was interested in Darwin's theory of evolution and the concept of natural selection, how we adapt to our environment. And I was thinking as I was jotting down these notes that the pandemic is a good example of that. Survival of the fittest. Natural selection is the survival of the fittest. Those who are healthiest or smartest or have the best genetic abilities survive the difficulties of climate and illness. And so our pandemic right now, we can see that happening, that older people, people with disabilities, people with pre-existing conditions are more likely to get the illness, are more likely to die from it. And the people who are careful and look after their families and stay home and wear their masks are less likely to get sick. And the people that go out and say, I don't care, and have parties on the beach are more likely to get sick and be more sick as well. People are getting very extreme illnesses in the younger people now, which at the beginning the younger people weren't getting sick and the children weren't getting sick, but now we actually see more severe illness even in the younger ones. So we have to adapt to our environment. And he believed that it was all about survival and reproduction, how our bodies, our environment will promote survival and reproduction at the risk of, you know, the above all costs. He focused on functions and how we fit into our environment. That's a good one to talk about today. Much of our psychological information is grounded in the work of Dr. Sigmund Freud. He was an Austrian neurologist, and he studied the whole mind rather than its individual parts. He was very interested in people with hysteria and neuroses. He was interested in women's emotional issues, and especially the mother's influence, especially in early childhood, on the family. We have a great responsibility as mothers, but we don't have to take all the blame that he thought that we did. He was very much interested in how the unconscious mind affects our choices. He used tools like dream analysis. He believed that your dreams told how you were really feeling and what you were really thinking. And he used examples like word association. He would give you a word, and then you had to answer back with another word. And he thought that by the answer, he could tell which way you were thinking. So if I said apple, I could say, if he said apple, I could say pie, or I could say core, or I could say tree. And that answer would give him an idea of what I was thinking. We remember him, we call it a Freudian slip, a slip of the tongue. An unintentional error, you say something accidentally, but it's regarded as if it reveals your real feelings. So it wasn't an accident that you said it. Psychoanalytical theory focuses on the role of the unconscious and early childhood experiences on our later life. He had a wonderful couch that he used. It was like this great lounge couch higher at one end, and the client would lay on that and just start talking. And he would be behind writing in his little notebook and asking questions like, you know, how is your relationship with your mother? You know, how did you feel about that? And people still think that counseling is like that you just start talking, and the counselor is just writing things down. But it's developed into something more of interactive than that. But that people still often think that that's what it was about. I liked his idea of the couch. I think everybody should have a couch. In Trinity Christian Reformed Church, in the lounge where I do counseling, there are three couches. So I always say there's one for me and one for my clients, so we can all relax. He was also the first one to propose transference, the relationship between the therapist and the client, and that it was very important. It's important to have a fit, a bond, and you can use that bond to help make the client comfortable, more open, more able to heal. He also studied that there is countertransference, and we've talked about this at the training center as well, that if the counselor doesn't have good boundaries, the client's countertransference can be quite problematic, and relationships that are inappropriate can start. Countertransference is when the client has a great need and the counselor sees that counselor is filling that need, and then an unhealthy relationship starts between them. So it's a very important. We'll study quite a bit about this as we go, not just about Freud, but in our own ethics, how important our boundaries are to be able to, yes, we need a relationship and a bond with the people that we're working with, but they have to stay within a healthy boundary that we're able to contain, having the balance of power. Freud also contributed a great deal to the knowledge about lifespan development, and I'm looking forward to teaching that part with Roseanne. Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Kafka moved to America in the 20th century to escape Nazi Germany. And over in Europe, Gestalt therapy was the predominant theory, and it translates in the German to whole. In the English, it's the whole person, the whole. The individual parts make up the whole. Now, when they came to America, it was different over here, and so they weren't able to continue their work quite as well as they were in Germany, but they did introduce America, North America, to the Gestalt theory, again, of inner experience. That inner experience is not a legitimate subject of scientific inquiry was what was thought over here, so they didn't give it as much relevance, importance, but these men challenged our thoughts about that. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking when I wrote those, but we'll skip over that. We will study more about Gestalt for sure. Behaviorism was the next direction that popped up. Pavlov, Watson, and Skinner, those are names I'm sure that you've heard. Ian Pavlov was a Russian psychologist, and he developed the theory of stimulus and response. We call it classical conditioning. And the most famous example of it was the dog getting a steak. And when the dog would expect the meat to come, he would start to saliva. His saliva would run, and he would start to drool, and he'd be all excited about the meat. And so Pavlov would ring a bell at the same time that the meat was coming. And so the dog associated the bell with the coming of the meat. I've had the same thing when I put on the electric can opener and I start to open the cat food, and the cat comes running because it knows that sound means food is coming. Well, as those two things became related to each other, when the dog heard the bell, he would already start to have his saliva. He knew that bell meant that the steak was coming. So that's you can use the bell and even without the steak to get the outcome. John B. Watson was an American psychologist, and he studied about learned behavior and behavior modification. He did a lot of his work with animals, especially with rats in mazes. And two particular experiments stand out for me. The one is it's a book that we have now called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's the rats go through the mazes looking for the reward of the cheese. And someone moved the cheese, and the rat came to where the cheese was supposed to be, and he sat down and he said, well, I'm just not moving. This is where my cheese is supposed to be, and I'm going to stay here till the cheese comes back. And it's a parody. It's a silly story about how important it is to be able to change when change is necessary. But it comes out of these experiments of working with the rats and having them come through the maze and be rewarded by finding the cheese, or if they're blocked, how they find different ways around it to get to the cheese. And John B. Watson believed that all of behavior could be explained by using rats and mazes. The other more poignant one that I often use when I'm talking with my clients that are recovering from trauma was when they put a rat in a container, and the rat was electrically shocked every few seconds in a regular interval. So the rat became aware that there was space between the shocks, and so he would learn how to jump up off the grid so that he wouldn't get shocked, and so he could protect himself. He knew when the shocks were coming, and he could get out of the way. But when they started sending the shocks randomly and the rat couldn't protect itself, then the rat just laid down on the grid and took the shocks. And that's often what happens to our clients who are suffering from trauma. So that experiment, as hard as that was on that rat, and I know, I'm so glad that now they don't do so much animal experimentation, but that definitely informed us on how people suffering from trauma do stop responding, and that's why it's hard for them to come out of abusive situations. And so knowing that, we can be helpful in a different way. B.F. Skinner was an American psychologist who worked with reinforcement and punishment, and we talked about that with Sarah, with her children, operant conditioning. So when she wanted her children to do something, she would have a reward for them. If you do this, you can have this. If you don't do this, then you can't have this. So it's negative and positive reinforcement. I won't go into all that, but he was the founder of that line of thinking, and very much used still today, reward and punishment. Abraham Maslow was the one who first brought forward the concept of humanism. He was an American psychologist, best known for proposing a hierarchy of human needs and motivational behavior. We've studied that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, yeah. So he was a humanist, and that focuses on the potential of all people for good. And both Maslow and Carl Rogers were influential in shaping humanistic psychology. Maslow believed that if you had your basic needs of food, water, warmth, rest, physiological needs met, that then you could go forward and build on, you're working up into self-actualization. So the most important things are to be able to breathe. People who can't breathe don't even care about food or water. But once you have the basics of life, and you feel safe, and you have security, and you have a family or friends, and you feel loved, you have belongingness, and you have a place where you feel that you're doing a good job, you have some accomplishment, some purpose for your life, self-esteem needs, and then you can go on to self-actualization, achieving your full potential, and including creative activities. So the basic needs need to be met before you can move on. The psychological needs have to be met before you can move on. The self-fulfillment needs in his model would come if those were already in place. Now, there are other ideas. There are other ideas about Philip Gutman brought forward, that actually these needs were all in play at the same time, and that at any one time, one need could come up above the other. So I can see that when I think of when people are very needy, don't have what they need, don't have belonging, often they will turn to art and poetry and their creative abilities to bring them up and out of that. The same thing with self-esteem needs. When you're feeling discouraged and not loved and not cared for, often you'll find a reward in the things that you use creatively. Singing. My daughter used to say I would hum to myself when I was depressed. So we're still learning from all of the models, and I learned a great deal when I came in 2014, and we were talking about, you had asked us to teach stress, anxiety, and depression, a 2-day workshop, and it was amazing. I was so grateful to be there. Some of you actually walked 25 kilometers to get there. There was nearly, I think there were 70 some odd people there, and I learned from you so much. We presented our ideas. You broke up into groups and came back and shared with us what you had learned. And this is what Tommy said: all this is well and good, but it's no good to me if I have no food for my family. And I had a hard time answering him back because he's absolutely right. And so that's very important that, and the Bible says that too, don't say to somebody, go, be well, have a good day, be warm, if you're not going to give them some food. So we have to care for each other at all the different levels of our needs, our psychological needs, our safety needs, our belonging needs. That's why our community is so important to us. So we don't have a family, or we find family in community. And our esteem needs, how important it is to hold each other up and be there for each other. And then this is what our aim is, that God wants you, so that I come to give you life and give it to you in the full. So Maslow believed that it was linear. Gottman believed that it was at the same time, and each one could come up at any time. Each need could come up at any time is the most important. And thank you to Tommy for being honest with us and helping us to remember how important that is. Carl Rogers was an American psychologist who emphasized the potential for good that exists within all people. He used a therapeutic technique known as client-centered therapy that we still use today. The patient takes a lead role in the therapy session. We say the patient is the expert, the client is the expert, and we learn from them. A therapist needs, he believed, to display 3 features: unconditional positive regard, genuineness, and empathy. Unconditional positive regard refers to the fact that the therapist accepts the client for who they are, no matter what he or she might say. That doesn't mean that we agree with their choices, agree with their lifestyle, agree with their actions, but it does mean that we come as people with just a basic need and a right for respect of the person. Now, this is like God's unconditional love, that love the sinner, hate the sin, you know? And we're not the judge, he's the judge. We're to meet people exactly where they are and let them start from there. And this, he believed that people were more than capable of dealing with and working through their own issues, that they had the truth inside of them, and our job as therapists was to help them connect with that, help them connect with what they knew they should do, and help them then to move forward. This probably is the hypothesis that most informs my counseling and my chaplaincy, believing that people are, that they are our teachers, that we are helping them to find what they know they need to do, and directing, being support and direction, but to allow them to have the freedom to make their own choices and to respect them as people just because they are. So then what's next? What's coming next? Roseanne's going to take it from here because she's a specialist in cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's the modern methods of counseling. But have you noticed from what we've talked about already that this is very much a white male-dominated field of study? You don't see women in there because at that time women were not considered competent even to vote, never mind to attain their doctorate. Many women completed all the same studies as the men but weren't allowed to have their doctorate. So Roseanne will share more about that. There's also few recorded contributions from other cultures, although we know very much from the Greek, from the Middle East. There were many people studying in this area, but we don't have that in our history. So I'm going to challenge you. Who are the Zambian, the African leaders and thinkers who contributed to your knowledge? Do some studying for us. I want you to teach us now. Who in your history has informed your knowledge of your emotions, of behavior, and of spirituality? And who will be next? Who will be next? Maybe it will be you. Maybe you'll be the one that does the studying and that can take us on to the next level that we're always reaching forward to. This is independent learning, and so we really want you to take charge of your own studying. We hope before each of our lesson times, which will be over the next 10 weeks, I'll be teaching on Tuesdays, and Roseanne will be teaching on the following Monday, and then I'll be the following Tuesday, and then she'll be the following Monday. We'll have it all down. You'll know the dates, and we'll send you invitations. But we're hoping that you will have read the chapter and jotted down what you think is important. At the end of every chapter, the whole book is loaded onto the Google Classroom that Leonti put on for us. You can also get it by just typing in OpenStax, OPENSTAX, in your search line, and you'll get the page that has all the textbooks on it from Rice University. And you can open up any one of them, not just psychology, but it's a Psychology 2E is the book on that page. And at the end of every chapter, there will be a little section on the vocabulary, what the key terms meant. Maybe there's some words that you saw that you weren't sure what they meant. And so that's the place to find out there. It also gives a little summary, and so a short form of what you just read. It told you what it was going to tell you, and then it's going to tell you what it told you. All through, there's all kinds of little hyperlinks that take you places where you can listen to people talking, or even the people themselves talking about what they believed and how they studied, or little experiments that they did. So please take advantage of those hyperlinks, click on them, and have some, explore a little bit. And then at the end, there's some review questions. This time we're going to review them with you, just so that you can get comfortable with them. So when we meet on Tuesday for our Zoom time, we'll review some of those questions. There are some critical thinking questions and some personal application questions. So by the time you finish with a chapter, you should know it really well. And remember that each chapter is going to build on the others. You're going to learn far more, especially about Freud and the conditioning and learning and behavior. And Roseanne's got some wonderful things ahead for you. So please be excited to learn. Take as much time as you can. We know that you're busy with lives and jobs, and that's why it took me 10 years to do mine. So I understand how hard it can be with children running around, but God will make a way. And here's a little bit of a bibliography. It's not nearly what needs to be here for all of the quotes that we've taken from have been from Psychology 2E, put out by Rice University. And it is their ministry to put textbooks into the hands of students for no cost. So we're very grateful for them. So we'll probably, we'll be building on our bibliography still. But this is the end of this presentation. And it's been so nice to be here with you, even virtually. I look forward to being with you when we have our discussion time, and for the rest of the 4 years, as we work through this degree. So thank you. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And now I have to figure out how to get this all. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to stop recording. Okay. God bless you. Thank you for everything. Bye.